Have you ever wondered why some people seem to effortlessly build incredible habits, while others struggle to stick with anything for more than a few days? The answer isn't willpower, it isn't motivation, and it definitely isn't some secret genetic advantage. The answer is understanding how your brain actually works and using that knowledge to stack the deck in your favor. Most people approach consistency completely backwards. They set massive goals, rely on bursts of motivation, and then wonder why they crash and burn within weeks. But what if I told you there's a way to hack your psychology so that building consistent habits becomes almost automatic? What if the secret isn't about forcing yourself to do more, but about making it impossible to do less? In this video, I'm going to reveal the hidden psychology behind consistency that 99% of people never discover. We're going to explore why small wins create bigger transformations than massive efforts, how your brain can become addicted to progress instead of procrastination, and the exact system that turns sporadic action into unstoppable momentum. This isn't just theory. This is a step-by-step blueprint that rewires how you think about building habits, achieving goals, and creating lasting change in your life. But first, let me tell you why this matters more than you might think. Every single day, you're either moving toward the person you want to become or away from that person. There's no neutral ground. Every choice you make is a vote for the identity you're building. And the scary truth is, most people are unknowingly voting against themselves every single day without even realizing it. Your brain is a pattern recognition machine. It's constantly looking for shortcuts, trying to predict what's going to happen next based on what happened before. And here's where it gets interesting. Your brain doesn't distinguish between good patterns and bad patterns. It just looks for consistency. If you consistently skip workouts, your brain learns that you're the type of person who skips workouts. If you consistently check your phone first thing in the morning, your brain learns that you're the type of person who starts the day reactive instead of proactive. But here's the beautiful part. You can use the same mechanism to build the identity you actually want. Every small action you take is like a vote in an election. And just like in politics, you don't need to win every vote to win the election. You just need to win more votes than you lose. This is where most people get it completely wrong. They think consistency means perfection. They think one missed day ruins everything. They think small actions don't matter because the results aren't immediately visible. But that's exactly backwards. Small actions matter precisely because they're small. They slip under your brain's resistance radar. They don't trigger the same fear and overwhelm that big actions do. And most importantly, they compound over time in ways that seem almost magical. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine two people. Person A decides to transform their life. They join a gym, commit to working out for 2 hours every day, overhaul their entire diet, wake up at 5 a.m., and start meditating for 30 minutes. They're motivated. They're determined. They're going to change everything at once. Person B takes a different approach. They commit to doing just one push-up every day. That's it. One single push-up. It sounds almost ridiculous, right? How could one push-up possibly compare to a complete life transformation? Here's what happens. Person A goes strong for about a week, maybe two if they're really disciplined, but eventually the massive changes become overwhelming. They miss a day, then feel guilty. They tell themselves they'll make up for it tomorrow by doing even more. But tomorrow becomes harder, not easier. The guilt compounds. The perfectionist mindset kicks in. They decide they've already failed, so why bother continuing? Within a month, they're back to their old habits, probably worse than before because now they have evidence that they can't stick to anything. Person B does their one push-up every day. Some days it's easy. Some days they don't want to do it, but it's just one push-up, so they do it anyway. After a few weeks, something interesting happens. One push-up starts to feel almost silly. They're already down there, so why not do 2 or 5? But here's the key. They never require themselves to do more than one. The extra push-ups are just bonus. After a month, person B has not missed a single day. They've built an identity as someone who exercises every day. Their brain has learned this new pattern, and because they're already in the habit of exercising daily, adding other small health habits becomes easier. Maybe they start drinking one extra glass of water. Maybe they take a short walk. Each small addition builds on the foundation they've already established. 6 months later, person A is still stuck in cycles of motivation and burnout. Person B has transformed not just their fitness, but their entire relationship with consistency. They've proven to themselves that they can stick to commitments. They've built confidence, they've created momentum, and most importantly, they've rewired their brain to expect success instead of failure. This is the psychology of small wins. Your brain is constantly looking for evidence to support your beliefs about yourself. If you believe you're the type of person who quits, your brain will find evidence to support that belief. But if you start collecting evidence that you're the type of person who follows through, even on tiny commitments, your brain begins to shift that identity. Every small win sends a signal to your subconscious mind that you're capable of change. It releases a tiny hit of dopamine, the same neurotransmitter involved in addiction. But instead of being addicted to scrolling social media or binge watching shows, you become addicted to the feeling of progress. You start craving that daily win. And here's where the magic happens. Once your brain associates you with consistency, it starts to feel uncomfortable when you break that pattern. The same psychological force that once worked against you now works for you. Missing your daily action starts to feel wrong, like wearing shoes on the wrong feet. Your brain actively pushes you toward the behavior because that's who you are now. But small wins do something else that's even more powerful. They eliminate the resistance that kills most attempts at change. Your brain has a built-in alarm system designed to protect you from anything that feels threatening or overwhelming. When you try to make massive changes, this alarm system goes off. It floods your body with stress hormones. It creates feelings of anxiety and overwhelm. It whispers all the reasons why you should quit before you even start. Small actions fly under this radar. One push-up doesn't feel threatening. Reading one page doesn't trigger overwhelm. Writing one sentence doesn't activate your brain's defense mechanisms. By starting smaller than you think you need to, you bypass the resistance that stops most people before they even begin. There's a Japanese concept called Kaizen that perfectly captures this principle. Kaizen means continuous improvement through small, incremental changes. It was originally developed for manufacturing, but it applies perfectly to personal development. The idea is that massive transformations happen not through giant leaps, but through countless tiny steps taken consistently over time. Think about how a river carves through rock. It doesn't happen through one massive flood. It happens through the gentle, persistent flow of water over decades and centuries. Each drop of water seems insignificant, but collectively they reshape the landscape. Your daily actions work the same way. Each one seems small and insignificant in isolation, but collectively they reshape who you are. The compound effect of small wins extends far beyond the specific action you're taking. When you prove to yourself that you can stick to one small commitment, it builds what psychologists call self-efficacy. This is your belief in your ability to execute behaviors necessary to produce specific performance attainments. In simpler terms, it's your confidence in your ability to do what you say you're going to do. This confidence spills over into every area of your life. When you trust yourself to follow through on small commitments, you start trusting yourself with bigger ones. When you see evidence that you can change, you start believing that other changes are possible too. When you experience the satisfaction of daily progress, you begin seeking that feeling in multiple areas of your life. But here's what most people miss. The power of small wins isn't just about building habits. It's about changing your relationship with difficulty itself. Most people avoid challenges because they associate effort with suffering. They think if something is hard, it means they're not good at it. They think if progress is slow, it means they're failing. Small wins teach you a different story. They show you that difficulty is just information, not judgment. They prove that slow progress is still progress. They demonstrate that consistency matters more than intensity. Most importantly, they reveal that you're capable of far more than you ever imagined, as long as you're willing to start smaller than feel significant. This is the foundation of everything we're going to explore in this series. Understanding that your brain is not working against you. It's working according to its programming. And once you understand that programming, you can use it to create the life you actually want instead of the life that just happens to you by default. The next layer of this psychology goes deeper than most people realize. Your brain doesn't just respond to the actions you take. It responds to the story you tell yourself about those actions. And this is where most people accidentally sabotage themselves without even knowing it. Let me explain what I mean. Two people can perform the exact same action but experience completely different psychological effects based on how they frame it in their minds. Person 1 does 10 push-ups and thinks, I only did 10 push-ups. I should have done 20. I'm so weak and undisciplined. Person 2 does the same 10 push-ups and thinks, I showed up today. I kept my commitment to myself. I'm building the identity of someone who exercises consistently. Same action, completely different psychological impact. The first person is training their brain to associate exercise with failure and self-criticism. The second person is training their brain to associate exercise with success and self-respect. Over time, these different mental frameworks create dramatically different outcomes. This is why your internal dialogue during small wins matters more than the wins themselves. Most people focus entirely on the external action and completely ignore the internal narrative. But your brain is listening to every word you say to yourself. It's taking notes. It's building a case file about who you are and what you're capable of. When you complete a small action, your brain is asking a simple question. What does this mean about me? If you answer with criticism and disappointment, you're programming yourself for future failure. If you answer with acknowledgement and pride, you're programming yourself for future success. The choice is entirely yours, but most people don't even realize they're making it. Here's a practical example that will change how you think about this. Let's say you commit to reading for 5 minutes every day. On day 1, you read for exactly 5 minutes and then stop. Your brain presents you with 2 possible interpretations. Option 1, I only read for 5 minutes. Real readers read for hours. This is pointless. Option 2, I kept my commitment. I chose learning over entertainment. I'm becoming the type of person who prioritizes growth. The external result is identical, but the internal result couldn't be more different. Option 1 creates shame, resistance, and the likelihood that you'll quit soon. Option 2 creates pride, momentum, and the likelihood that you'll continue and eventually expand. Most people unconsciously choose option 1 because they've been programmed to believe that small actions aren't valuable. They've been taught that if something doesn't feel hard or significant, it doesn't count. This is one of the most destructive beliefs you can hold about personal development. The truth is exactly the opposite. Small actions count more than big ones because they're sustainable. They count more because they build identity without triggering resistance. They count more because they create patterns that compound over time, but only if you give them the psychological credit they deserve. This connects to something psychologists call attribution theory. This is how you explain your successes and failures to yourself. People who struggle with consistency typically attribute their small wins to external factors. I only went for a walk because the weather was nice. I only ate healthy because I didn't have junk food in the house. I only meditated because I had extra time this morning. People who build unstoppable consistency attribute their small wins to internal factors. I went for a walk because I'm committed to my health. I ate healthy because I value my body. I meditated because I'm building discipline. Same actions, but completely different psychological ownership. When you attribute your wins to external circumstances, you're essentially telling your brain that you're not in control. You're suggesting that your success depends on everything being perfect. Your brain learns that you're the type of person who only follows through when conditions are ideal. This creates a fragile system that collapses the moment life gets challenging. When you attribute your wins to internal factors, you're telling your brain that you're in control. You're proving that you can succeed regardless of circumstances. Your brain learns that you're the type of person who follows through no matter what. This creates an anti-fragile system that actually gets stronger under pressure. But there's another psychological principle at work here that's even more powerful. It's called the progress principle, and it was discovered by Harvard Business School professor Teresa Amable after analyzing thousands of diary entries from people in various professions. What she found was remarkable. Of all the events that could happen during a workday, the single most important factor in determining someone's motivation, creativity, and overall well-being was whether they experienced a sense of progress. Not a big breakthroughs, not major accomplishments, just progress, forward movement, evidence that they were getting somewhere. The same principle applies to personal development. Your brain is constantly scanning for evidence of progress. When it finds that evidence, it releases neurochemicals that make you feel good, increase your motivation, and enhance your cognitive performance. When it doesn't find that evidence, it does the opposite. Here's the fascinating part: the amount of progress doesn't matter nearly as much as the consistency of progress. Your brain responds more strongly to small daily progress than to occasional big wins. This is because your brain is designed to predict the future based on patterns, not events. Think about it from an evolutionary perspective. Our ancestors survived by recognizing patterns. The tribe that consistently found small amounts of food every day was more likely to survive than the tribe that occasionally found large amounts but went days without eating. Your brain still operates according to this ancient programming. It values consistency over intensity because consistency equals survival. This is why people who make small daily progress often outperform people who make sporadic big efforts, even when the sporadic efforts add up to more total action. The daily progress creates a psychological momentum that compounds over time. The sporadic efforts create a stop and start pattern that trains your brain to expect inconsistency. But here's where most people get tripped up. They understand the concept of small wins, but they implement it incorrectly. They think small wins mean setting tiny goals and being satisfied with minimal results. That's not what this is about at all. Small wins are about setting minimum viable actions that guarantee you'll maintain momentum while leaving room for expansion when you feel motivated. The goal isn't to do the minimum forever. The goal is to never do less than the minimum while often doing more. Let me give you a concrete example. If you want to build a writing habit, you might commit to writing 50 words every day. That's your minimum viable action. On most days, you'll probably write more than 50 words because once you start, momentum takes over. But on difficult days, when you're tired or stressed or unmotivated, you only need to write 50 words to maintain your streak and preserve your identity. This approach gives you the psychological benefits of consistency without the pressure of perfection. You're never failing because you're always meeting your minimum standard. But you're also not limiting yourself because you can exceed that standard whenever you want. The key is choosing minimums that are almost impossible to fail at while still being meaningful enough to create identity change. 50 words is enough to maintain the identity of a daily writer. One push-up is enough to maintain the identity of someone who exercises. 5 minutes of reading is enough to maintain the identity of a lifelong learner. These minimums serve as psychological anchors. They keep you connected to your desired identity even when life gets chaotic. They prevent the all or nothing thinking that destroys most people's attempts at change. And they create a foundation that makes expansion feel natural rather than forced. But the real magic happens when you start linking these small wins together. This is called habit stacking, and it's one of the most powerful ways to accelerate your progress without increasing your effort. The idea is to use an existing habit as a trigger for a new habit you want to build. Your brain loves sequences. Once it learns a pattern, it wants to complete that pattern. If you can attach your new small win to an existing routine, you can leverage the momentum of your established habits to pull you through the new behavior. For example, if you already brush your teeth every morning, you can stack a new habit right after. After I brush my teeth, I will do one push-up. The established habit becomes the trigger for the new habit. Your brain starts to expect the push-up immediately after the toothbrush, and eventually the sequence feels automatic. This works because you're not trying to create motivation from scratch. You're borrowing the momentum from a habit that's already established. It's like drafting behind another cyclist. You get all the benefits of forward movement with much less effort. The compound effect of multiple small habits stacked together creates transformations that seem impossible when viewed from the outside. Someone might look at a person who wakes up early, exercises, meditates, reads, and eats healthy, and think they must have incredible willpower. But often, it's just a carefully constructed sequence of small habits that pull each other forward. The beauty of this system becomes even more apparent when you understand how your brain processes rewards. Most people think they need to feel motivated before they take action, but neuroscience reveals the opposite is true. Action creates motivation, not the other way around. Every time you complete a small action, your brain releases a tiny hit of dopamine. This neurochemical doesn't just make you feel good in the moment. It actually rewires your neural pathways to make the behavior more likely in the future. Think of dopamine as your brain's learning signal. It's telling your neural networks that whatever just happened was worth remembering and repeating. The more consistently you trigger this signal through small wins, the stronger those neural pathways become. Eventually, the behavior becomes so deeply ingrained that not doing it feels unnatural. But here's what's truly remarkable. Your brain releases more dopamine when you anticipate a reward than when you actually receive it. This means the act of maintaining a streak becomes its own reward system. Each day you maintain your commitment, you're not just getting satisfaction from completing the action. You're getting satisfaction from the anticipation of continuing your streak. This creates what psychologists call a positive feedback loop. The more you succeed, the more you want to succeed. The more consistent you become, the more your brain craves consistency. You literally become addicted to following through on your commitments, but in the healthiest possible way. I've seen this transformation happen countless times. Someone starts with something absurdly small, like drinking one extra glass of water each day. Within weeks, they're not just drinking more water. They're meal prepping, exercising regularly, and reading before bed. The single habit becomes a catalyst that transforms their entire lifestyle. This happens because small wins create what researchers call behavioral momentum. Just like a rolling ball gathers speed as it moves downhill, consistent small actions gather psychological momentum as they compound over time. Each day you follow through makes the next day easier. Each week of consistency makes the next week more automatic. Each month of progress makes the next month feel inevitable. Most people never experience this momentum because they quit before it has a chance to build. They expect immediate results, and when they don't see dramatic changes after a few days or weeks, they assume their efforts aren't working. But momentum is invisible in the beginning. You can't see it, but it's building beneath the surface. It's like pushing a massive boulder. The first push barely moves it. The second push moves it slightly. The third push moves it a little more. For a long time, it feels like you're making no progress at all. But each push is building momentum, even when you can't see it. Eventually, you reach a tipping point where the boulder starts rolling on its own. Suddenly, what felt impossible becomes unstoppable. Your habits work exactly the same way. The first few weeks feel like pushing that boulder. You're putting in effort but seeing minimal results. Your brain is telling you it's not working. Your old patterns are fighting back. Everything feels forced and unnatural. This is the valley of despair that most people never escape. But if you persist through this phase, something magical happens. The habits start to feel easier. The resistance decreases. The actions begin to feel natural, even automatic. You've reached the tipping point where your new identity starts pulling you forward instead of your old identity pulling you backward. The timeline for this transformation varies from person to person and habit to habit, but research suggests it typically takes anywhere from 21 to 254 days, with an average of about 66 days. The key variable isn't time though, it's consistency. Someone who maintains perfect consistency for 30 days will often see faster results than someone who maintains sporadic effort for 90 days. This is why your minimum viable actions matter so much. They ensure you never break the chain, even when life gets challenging. They guarantee you'll reach that tipping point because you're never allowing momentum to completely stop. But there's a deeper psychological principle at work here that most people miss entirely. Small wins don't just change your behavior. They change your identity. And identity change is the most powerful form of motivation because it comes from within rather than from external pressure. When someone asks you to describe yourself, you probably use labels. I'm a teacher, a parent, an athlete, a creative person. These labels aren't just descriptions, they're predictions. They tell your brain what kinds of behaviors are expected from someone like you. If you see yourself as an athlete, you naturally gravitate toward athletic behaviors. If you see yourself as a creative person, you naturally seek creative outlets. The problem is, most people have identities that work against their goals. They see themselves as someone who's not good with money, so they avoid learning about finances. They see themselves as someone who's not athletic, so they avoid physical challenges. They see themselves as someone who's bad at technology, so they resist learning new digital skills. These limiting identities become self-fulfilling prophecies. Your brain works tirelessly to maintain consistency between your actions and your beliefs about yourself. If you believe you're not a morning person, your brain will make getting up early feel impossible. If you believe you're not disciplined, your brain will make sticking to routines feel unnatural. But identity is not fixed. It's fluid. It changes based on the evidence you provide. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you believe yourself to be. The beautiful thing about small wins is they allow you to cast votes for a new identity without triggering the psychological resistance that comes with dramatic change. When you do one push-up, you're casting a vote for being someone who exercises. When you read one page, you're casting a vote for being someone who values learning. When you write 50 words, you're casting a vote for being someone who creates. Each individual vote seems insignificant, but votes compound over time. The moment you have more votes for your new identity than your old identity, something shifts. Your brain starts expecting the new behaviors. The old patterns start feeling foreign. You begin to think of yourself differently, and when your thinking changes, your actions follow automatically. This identity-based approach to change is infinitely more powerful than goal-based approaches because it's sustainable. Goals have endpoints. Once you reach them, the motivation disappears, and you often revert to old patterns. Identity has no endpoint. It's a way of being that perpetually reinforces itself. Someone with a goal to lose 20 pounds will diet until they reach that weight, then often gain it back because their underlying identity hasn't changed. Someone who develops the identity of a healthy person will naturally make choices that maintain their health indefinitely because that's who they are now. The shift from goal-based thinking to identity-based thinking is subtle but revolutionary. Instead of asking, what do I want to achieve? You start asking, who do I want to become? Instead of focusing on outcomes, you focus on the type of person who would naturally produce those outcomes. This approach eliminates the willpower problem that destroys most people's attempts at change. When you're trying to force yourself to do something that conflicts with your identity, it requires enormous mental energy. You're essentially fighting yourself every step of the way. But when your actions align with your identity, they feel effortless because you're not fighting yourself. You're expressing yourself. The practical application of this is simple but profound. Before you choose your small win, get clear on the identity you want to build. If you want to become someone who's physically fit, choose a small action that fit people do consistently. If you want to become someone who's financially responsible, choose a small action that financially responsible people do consistently. The action itself is less important than its connection to your desired identity. One push-up isn't significant because of the physical benefits. It's significant because it reinforces the identity of someone who prioritizes their health. 50 words aren't significant because of the literary output. They're significant because they reinforce the identity of someone who creates regularly. This identity reinforcement creates what psychologists call cognitive consistency. Your brain has a powerful drive to maintain consistency between your beliefs and your actions. When you start seeing yourself as a certain type of person, your brain automatically looks for ways to act in accordance with that identity. This is why successful people often make success look effortless. It's not that they have more willpower or better genetics, it's that their actions align with their identity. They're not forcing themselves to work hard. They're expressing their identity as someone who works hard. They're not disciplining themselves to eat healthy. They're expressing their identity as someone who values their health. The transformation from effortful to effortless happens gradually through the accumulation of small wins. Each small action strengthens the neural pathways associated with your new identity. Each day of consistency makes the behaviors feel more natural. Each week of progress makes the identity feel more real. Eventually, you reach a point where the old identity feels like a costume you used to wear, and the new identity feels like your authentic self. When someone offers you junk food, you don't think, I can't eat that because I'm on a diet. You think, I don't eat that because I'm someone who values my health. The external restriction becomes an internal expression. This is the ultimate goal of the small wins approach. Not just to build habits, but to build the identity of someone for whom those habits are natural expressions of who they are. When you reach this point, consistency becomes automatic because you're no longer trying to be someone else. You're just being yourself. But here's where most people make a critical mistake that undermines everything we've just discussed. They focus so much on the action itself that they completely ignore the environment that makes that action possible. Your environment is silently shaping your behavior every single moment of every single day. And if you don't design it intentionally, it will design you by default. Think about the last time you walked into a bakery. You probably weren't planning to buy anything when you walked in, but suddenly you found yourself craving fresh bread or pastries. That's not a coincidence. That's environmental design at work. The smell, the lighting, the display cases, even the music playing in the background. Everything was carefully crafted to trigger specific behaviors. Your home environment works the same way, except most people have accidentally designed it to trigger the behaviors they're trying to avoid. They keep their phone next to their bed and wonder why they can't stop scrolling first thing in the morning. They stock their kitchen with processed snacks and wonder why they can't stick to healthy eating. They leave their workout clothes buried in a drawer and wonder why they can't maintain an exercise routine. Environmental design isn't just about removing temptations, though that's certainly part of it. It's about making your desired behavior so obvious and easy that they become the path of least resistance. When good choices require less effort than bad choices, you don't need willpower to make them. The environment does the heavy lifting for you. Let me give you a concrete example that will change how you think about this. Sarah wanted to start reading more, but she kept getting distracted by her phone every time she sat down with a book. She tried using willpower to resist the urge to check social media, but it felt like fighting a losing battle. Then she made one simple environmental change. She moved her phone to a different room and left her book open on the coffee table where she used to keep her phone. The result was immediate and dramatic. Instead of having to resist the temptation to pick up her phone, she now had to overcome the friction of walking to another room to get it. Meanwhile, the book was right there, open to where she left off, requiring zero effort to continue reading. Within a month, she was reading for an hour every evening without any struggle or internal negotiation. This is the power of environmental design. When you have to overcome friction to engage in bad habits and you remove friction from good habits, you're essentially programming your future behavior. You're making decisions in advance. When your willpower is strong, that will guide your actions later. When your willpower is weak, the key is understanding that your brain is constantly scanning your environment for cues about what to do next. These cues operate below the level of conscious awareness, but they're incredibly powerful. A cluttered desk cues distraction. A made bed cues productivity. A bowl of fruit on the counter cues healthy eating. Running shoes by the door cue exercise. Most people leave these environmental cues to chance, then wonder why they struggle with consistency. But when you intentionally design your environment to support your desired behaviors, consistency becomes much easier because you're working with your brain's natural tendencies instead of against them. Environmental design works on multiple levels. There's your physical environment, which includes everything from the layout of your home to the apps on your phone. There's your social environment, which includes the people you spend time with and the conversations you have. And there's your information environment, which includes the books you read, the podcasts you listen to, and the content you consume. Each of these environments is either supporting your growth or hindering it. There's no neutral ground. If you're not intentionally designing environments that pull you toward your goals, you're probably surrounded by environments that pull you away from them. Your social environment might be the most powerful of all. Humans are incredibly social creatures, and we unconsciously mirror the behaviors of the people around us. If you're surrounded by people who complain constantly, you'll find yourself complaining more. If you're surrounded by people who prioritize health and growth, you'll find yourself naturally adopting similar habits. This doesn't mean you need to abandon all your friends, but it does mean you need to be intentional about who you spend your time with and how that time is spent. The conversations you have shape the thoughts you think. The activities you do together shape the habits you develop. The standards that are normal in your social circle become the standards that feel normal to you. I once knew someone who struggled to maintain healthy eating habits until they started having lunch with a coworker who brought homemade salads every day. They didn't set out to change their eating habits, but being around someone who made healthy choices normalized those choices. Within a few months, they found themselves naturally gravitating toward healthier options without any conscious effort. This is called social proof, and it's one of the most powerful psychological forces shaping human behavior. We look to others to determine what's normal, what's acceptable, and what's expected. When you surround yourself with people who embody the habits you want to develop, those habits start feeling normal instead of exceptional. The social environment isn't just about the people you spend time with in person. In today's connected world, your digital social environment might be even more influential. The accounts you follow on social media, the YouTube channels you watch, the podcasts you listen to, they're all part of your extended social circle. They're all influencing your thoughts, your standards, and your behaviors. If your social media feed is full of people making excuses, celebrating mediocrity, or promoting instant gratification, that's what will start to feel normal to you. But if your feed is full of people sharing their growth journeys, celebrating small wins, and encouraging consistency, that's what will start to feel normal instead. This is why curating your information environment is just as important as curating your physical environment. Every piece of content you consume is either reinforcing the identity you want to build or the identity you want to leave behind. There's no neutral content, just like there are no neutral actions. The beautiful thing about environmental design is that it creates what psychologists call contextual conditioning. This means your brain starts to associate specific environments with specific behaviors. When you consistently read in a particular chair, that chair becomes a reading cue. When you consistently work out in a particular room, that room becomes an exercise cue. Over time, simply being in these environments triggers the associated behaviors automatically. You sit in your reading chair and your brain naturally shifts into reading mode. You walk into your workout space and your body naturally prepares for exercise. The environment becomes a powerful trigger that eliminates the need for conscious decision making. But here's what most people don't realize about environmental design. It's not just about creating cues for good behaviors. It's also about removing cues for bad behaviors. Every environmental cue that triggers an unwanted behavior is working against your consistency goals. Think about the environmental cues in your current space. What behaviors do they trigger? If you see your TV remote, you probably think about watching TV. If you see dirty dishes, you probably feel stressed or overwhelmed. If you see your phone charging next to your bed, you probably think about checking messages or scrolling through apps. Each of these cues is programming your behavior without your conscious awareness. The more intentional you become about designing your environment, the more control you have over your automatic responses. Instead of being a victim of random environmental triggers, you become the architect of your own behavioral patterns. Environmental design also works because it reduces what psychologists call decision fatigue. Every day, you have a limited amount of mental energy available for making decisions. When you have to consciously decide whether to engage in good behaviors and resist bad behaviors, you're depleting this mental energy throughout the day. But when your environment is designed to make good behaviors obvious and bad behaviors difficult, you're conserving mental energy for more important decisions. You're not wasting willpower on routine choices because the environment is guiding you toward the right choices automatically. This is why successful people often have very structured, predictable environments. It's not because they lack spontaneity or creativity. It's because they understand that decision fatigue is real and they want to preserve their mental energy for the decisions that matter most. Steve Jobs famously wore the same style of clothing every day to eliminate the decision of what to wear. Barack Obama did the same thing when he was president. They weren't being boring or uncreative. They were being strategic about how they used their mental energy. You can apply the same principle to your consistency goals. Instead of relying on daily willpower to make the right choices, you can design your environment to make those choices automatic. When a healthy food is prepared and visible, eating healthy becomes the obvious choice. When your workout clothes are laid out, exercising becomes the obvious choice. When your book is open on your nightstand, reading becomes the obvious choice. But environmental design goes deeper than just physical cues. It also includes what psychologists call implementation intentions. These are specific plans about when and where you'll perform your desired behaviors. Instead of just deciding to exercise more, you decide to exercise in your living room immediately after you brush your teeth in the morning. The specificity of implementation intentions is crucial because it eliminates the mental negotiation that happens when behaviors are vague. When you decide to exercise more, your brain has to figure out what that means every single day. When should I exercise? Where should I exercise? What type of exercise should I do? All of these micro decisions create friction and opportunities for procrastination. But when you decide to do 10 push ups in my living room immediately after brushing my teeth, there's no negotiation required. Your brain knows exactly what to do and when to do it. The behavior becomes automatic because the trigger is specific and the action is predetermined. Research shows that people who create implementation intentions are significantly more likely to follow through on their goals compared to people who just set general intentions. The specificity eliminates ambiguity, and ambiguity is one of the biggest enemies of consistency. Implementation intentions also work because they take advantage of something called temporal landmarks. These are specific moments in time that feel like natural starting points for new behaviors. Monday mornings, the first day of the month, your birthday, New Year's Day, these all feel like fresh starts to your brain. But you don't have to wait for major temporal landmarks to create implementation intentions. Every day is full of smaller landmarks that can serve as triggers for your desired behaviors. Waking up, finishing breakfast, arriving at work, eating lunch, coming home, these are all natural transition points that can anchor new habits. The key is choosing triggers that already happen consistently in your life. If you try to anchor a new habit to something that only happens occasionally, the habit won't stick because the trigger isn't reliable. But if you anchor it to something that happens every single day at roughly the same time, the habit becomes part of your natural routine. This is where most people go wrong with habit formation. They choose triggers based on when they think they should do something rather than when they actually will do something. They decide to meditate first thing in the morning, even though their mornings are chaotic and unpredictable. They decide to go to the gym after work, even though they're exhausted by the end of the day. Instead of fighting against your natural rhythms and existing schedule, work with them. If you're naturally more energetic in the morning, anchor your physical habits to morning triggers. If you're naturally more creative in the evening, anchor your creative habits to evening triggers. If you have a predictable lunch break, anchor your learning habits to that consistent window of time. The goal is to make your desired behaviors feel inevitable rather than optional. When you combine environmental design with implementation intentions, you create what researchers call a behavioral script. This is a predetermined sequence of actions that unfolds automatically once it's triggered. Think about your morning routine for brushing your teeth. You probably don't consciously decide each step. You automatically go to the bathroom, pick up your toothbrush, apply toothpaste, brush for about 2 minutes, rinse, and put everything back. This entire sequence happens without conscious thought because it's been repeated so many times that it's become scripted. You can create the same kind of automatic sequence for any behavior you want to develop. The key is starting with actions that are so small and simple that they require minimal conscious effort. Once the script is established, you can gradually expand it without disrupting the automatic nature of the sequence. For example, if you want to develop a writing habit, you might start with a script that goes, after I pour my morning coffee, I will sit at my desk, open my laptop, create a new document, and write one sentence. Once this sequence becomes automatic, you can expand it to 2 sentences, then a paragraph, then multiple paragraphs. But the trigger and the initial steps remain the same, preserving the automatic nature of the habit. This approach works because your brain loves predictable patterns. Once it learns a sequence, it wants to complete that sequence. Starting the script triggers a neurological momentum that pulls you through the rest of the actions. This is why it's often harder to start a behavior than to continue it once you've begun. Most people focus all their energy on trying to maintain motivation throughout an entire behavior, but that's backwards. The key is making it as easy as possible to start, then letting momentum carry you forward. When you remove friction from the starting point, the rest of the behavior often takes care of itself. This is particularly important for behaviors that require sustained effort, like exercise or creative work. Instead of trying to motivate yourself to work out for an hour, focus on motivating yourself to put on your workout clothes. Instead of trying to motivate yourself to write a chapter, focus on motivating yourself to open your laptop and create a new document. More often than not, once you start, you'll naturally continue for longer than your minimum commitment. But even if you don't, you've still maintained your identity and preserved your momentum. You've proven to yourself that you're the type of person who shows up consistently, regardless of how you feel. This psychological shift from outcome focus to process focus is one of the most powerful changes you can make in your approach to consistency. When you're focused on outcomes, every day feels like a test that you either pass or fail. When you're focused on process, every day feels like practice that makes you stronger regardless of the immediate results. Process focus also protects you from the perfectionism trap that destroys most people's consistency efforts. Perfectionists set high standards, which seems positive, but they also tend to abandon their efforts entirely when they fall short of those standards. This all or nothing thinking creates a boom and bust cycle that prevents long-term progress. Process focus eliminates this problem by making every day a success as long as you complete your minimum viable action. You can't fail at the process because the process is simply showing up. Some days you'll exceed your minimums, and some days you'll just meet them. Both count as victories because both reinforce your identity and maintain your momentum. The compound effect of this mindset is extraordinary. People who focus on process consistently outperform people who focus on outcomes, even when the outcome-focused people have more talent or resources. This happens because process focus creates sustainable systems, while outcome focus creates unsustainable bursts of effort. Think of it like the difference between a sprint and a marathon. Sprinters might cover ground faster in the short term, but marathon runners cover much more distance overall because they maintain a sustainable pace. Consistency is a marathon, not a sprint, and the winners are always the people who can maintain their pace over the long haul. But here's the paradox that confuses most people. The best way to achieve outstanding outcomes is to stop focusing on outcomes and start focusing on process. When you focus on building systems that naturally produce the results you want, those results become inevitable rather than elusive. This is why small wins are so powerful. They're not about accepting mediocre results. They're about building systems that make extraordinary results inevitable. Every small win is a building block in a larger structure that compounds over time into something remarkable. The people who understand this principle are the ones who seem to effortlessly achieve things that others struggle with for years. They're not more talented or more motivated. They're just more strategic about how they build momentum and maintain consistency. They focus on the process that creates outcomes rather than the outcomes themselves. This process-focused approach extends beyond individual habits to encompass your entire lifestyle. When you consistently make small positive choices across multiple areas of your life, they start to reinforce each other. Your exercise habit gives you more energy for your work. Your reading habit gives you better ideas for your creative projects. Your meditation habit gives you better emotional regulation for your relationships. These interconnected improvements create what systems theorists call positive feedback loops. Each positive change makes other positive changes easier, creating an upward spiral of growth that accelerates over time. This is how people transform their entire lives through what appears to be simple habit formation. But the opposite is also true. Negative choices create negative feedback loops that spiral downward. Poor sleep makes you more likely to eat poorly. Poor eating makes you more likely to skip exercise. Skipping exercise makes you more likely to feel stressed and overwhelmed. Each negative choice makes the next negative choice more likely. The beautiful thing about understanding these feedback loops is that you don't need to fix everything at once to reverse a negative spiral. You just need to consistently make positive choices in one area, and that consistency will naturally spill over into other areas. The small win approach gives you a sustainable way to interrupt negative patterns without overwhelming yourself with too many changes at once. This spillover effect is one of the most underestimated aspects of habit formation. People think habits exist in isolation, but they actually exist as part of interconnected systems. When you change one part of the system, it influences every other part of the system. This is why someone who starts exercising often spontaneously starts eating better, sleeping better, and managing stress better. Your brain is constantly looking for patterns and connections. When you consistently make positive choices in one area, your brain starts to expect positive choices in other areas too. You begin to see yourself as someone who makes positive choices generally, not just someone who exercises or reads or meditates. This identity generalization is incredibly powerful because it creates what psychologists call a halo effect. When you see yourself as disciplined in one area, you naturally expect to be disciplined in other areas. When you prove to yourself that you can stick to commitments, you become more willing to make commitments in new areas. The compound effect of this identity shift extends far beyond habits into every aspect of your life. You start approaching challenges with more confidence because you have evidence that you can persist through difficulty. You start setting bigger goals because you trust yourself to follow through. You start taking on more responsibility because you believe in your ability to handle it. This is the ultimate power of small wins. They don't just change what you do, they change who you are. And when you change who you are, everything else changes automatically because your actions flow naturally from your identity. The transformation from someone who struggles with consistency to someone who embodies it isn't just about changing your actions. It's about rewiring the fundamental stories you tell yourself about who you are and what you're capable of. Most people carry around invisible scripts that dictate their behavior, and these scripts were written by past experiences, often by failures that happened years or even decades ago. Think about the last time you tried to build a new habit and failed. What story did you tell yourself about that failure? Most people say things like, I just don't have willpower, or I'm not disciplined enough, or I always start strong but can't maintain anything. These stories become self-fulfilling prophecies because your brain works tirelessly to prove them true. But here's what's fascinating about the human mind. The same mechanism that locks you into limiting stories can be used to create empowering ones. Your brain doesn't distinguish between stories that serve you and stories that sabotage you. It just looks for evidence to support whatever narrative you're reinforcing through your actions. Every time you complete a small win, you're providing evidence for a new story. You're proving that you're someone who follows through. You're demonstrating that you can be trusted with commitments. You're showing that you have more control over your behavior than you previously believed. These new data points slowly but surely overwrite the old limiting narratives. The key is understanding that identity change happens gradually, then suddenly. For weeks or months, you might not feel like a different person even though you're consistently taking different actions. This is normal and expected. Your conscious mind changes faster than your unconscious identity, so there's often a lag between your new behaviors and your new self-concept. But then something shifts. You wake up one day and realize that skipping your daily action feels wrong, like wearing someone else's clothes. You notice that you naturally make choices that support your goals without having to think about it. You catch yourself describing yourself differently when people ask about your habits and interests. The new identity has taken root at a subconscious level. This identity shift creates what psychologists call intrinsic motivation. Instead of pushing yourself to do things because you think you should, you start being pulled toward them because they align with who you are. The difference in psychological experience is profound. Pushing requires constant effort and creates resistance. Being pulled feels natural and creates momentum. Most people never experience intrinsic motivation for their desired behaviors because they try to change too much too quickly. They overwhelm their system with demands that conflict with their current identity, creating internal resistance that feels like laziness or lack of willpower, but it's not laziness. It's your brain protecting you from what it perceives as a threat to your sense of self. Small wins bypass this resistance by creating change that's so gradual your identity has time to adapt. You're not trying to become a completely different person overnight. You're just adding small behaviors that someone like you might reasonably do. This gentle approach allows your identity to evolve naturally without triggering the psychological immune system that rejects dramatic change. The process of identity evolution through small wins follows a predictable pattern. First, you prove to yourself that you can do the behavior. This builds what researchers call behavioral confidence. Then you prove to yourself that you can do it consistently. This builds identity confidence. Finally, the behavior becomes so integrated into your sense of self that not doing it feels like betraying who you are. Each stage of this evolution requires different psychological skills. The first stage requires you to overcome inertia and prove that action is possible. The second stage requires you to overcome inconsistency and prove that persistence is possible. The third stage requires you to overcome the temptation to abandon your new identity when life gets challenging. Most people get stuck in the second stage because they underestimate how long it takes for behaviors to become identity integrated. They expect to feel like a different person within days or weeks. And when they don't, they assume the approach isn't working. But identity change operates on a different timeline than behavioral change. Behaviors can change overnight. Identity changes over months and years. This is why patience isn't just helpful for building habits. It's essential. Not the passive patience of waiting for something to happen, but the active patience of continuing to take consistent action even when you don't see immediate identity shifts. Every day of consistency is making deposits in your identity bank account even when you can't see the balance growing. The compound interest of identity change becomes visible when you look back over longer time periods. Someone might feel exactly the same after 30 days of consistent action, but dramatically different after 300 days. The daily changes are too small to notice, but the cumulative change is unmistakable. This is why focusing on streaks and consistency is more valuable than focusing on feelings and immediate results. But identity change doesn't happen in isolation. It's constantly being influenced by the feedback you receive from your environment and the people in your life. When others start noticing your changes and commenting on them, it accelerates your identity shift. External recognition validates your internal transformation and makes the new identity feel more real. This is why it's important to be intentional about sharing your journey with others, at least selectively. When you tell trusted people about your commitments and they witness you following through, they start seeing you differently. Their changed perception influences how they interact with you, which reinforces your new identity. They might ask for advice about building habits or comment on your discipline. These interactions strengthen your identity as someone who has expertise in consistency. However, there's a delicate balance to strike here. Sharing your goals and progress can be motivating, but it can also be counterproductive if you share with the wrong people or in the wrong way. Some people will unconsciously try to pull you back to your old identity because your growth makes them uncomfortable about their own lack of progress. Others might give you premature credit for changes you haven't fully integrated yet, which can reduce your motivation to continue. The key is sharing your process rather than your outcomes, and sharing with people who genuinely support your growth. Instead of saying, "I'm becoming a fitness enthusiast," you might say, "I'm working on building more consistent habits." Instead of announcing dramatic changes, you might quietly demonstrate them through your actions and let others notice naturally. This approach protects your emerging identity from external interference, while still allowing you to benefit from social support. It also prevents you from getting caught up in performing your new identity for others instead of genuinely embodying it. Authentic identity change happens from the inside out, not from the outside in. The relationship between small wins and identity change also reveals something profound about human potential. Most people dramatically underestimate what they can accomplish over long periods of time, while overestimating what they can accomplish in short periods. This temporal mismatch creates frustration and abandonment of potentially transformative practices. Small wins correct this mismatch by aligning your expectations with reality. They teach you that meaningful change happens slowly but surely, like water gradually shaping stone. They show you that extraordinary outcomes are just ordinary actions repeated consistently over extraordinary periods of time. They prove that you don't need to be exceptional to achieve exceptional results. You just need to be consistent. This insight liberates you from the pressure to be perfect or motivated all the time. You don't need to feel inspired every day. You don't need to have endless energy or unwavering focus. You just need to show up and do your minimum viable action, regardless of how you feel. Over time, this consistency creates its own inspiration and energy. The psychological freedom that comes from understanding this principle cannot be overstated. Most people live in constant anxiety about their ability to maintain positive changes. They worry about losing motivation, facing setbacks, or reverting to old patterns. This anxiety often becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because the fear of failure creates the very tension that leads to failure. Small wins eliminate this anxiety by making success feel inevitable rather than uncertain. When your daily requirement is genuinely achievable regardless of circumstances, failure becomes almost impossible. You might have bad days or challenging periods, but you can't really fail at doing one push-up or reading one page or writing one sentence. The bar is so low that consistency is virtually guaranteed. This guarantee of success creates a psychological foundation of confidence that extends far beyond your specific habits. When you prove to yourself that you can maintain consistency in one area despite obstacles and challenges, you start believing you can maintain consistency in other areas too. The confidence becomes generalized rather than specific. This generalized confidence is one of the most valuable byproducts of the small wins approach. It affects how you approach new challenges, how you respond to setbacks, and how you think about your own capabilities. People with high confidence in their ability to maintain consistency are more likely to start new projects, pursue ambitious goals, and persist through difficulties. They're also more resilient when they face inevitable setbacks because they don't interpret temporary failures as permanent character flaws. They see setbacks, they get backs as information rather than in back on track quickly because they have abundant evidence that they can maintain positive patterns over time. The compound effect of this confidence extends into every area of life. Relationships improve because you become more reliable and trustworthy. Career opportunities increase because you develop a reputation for following through on commitments. Health improves because you consistently make choices that support your well being. Finances improve because you stick to budgets and savings plans. These improvements don't happen because you're working directly on every area of your life. They happen because the identity you develop through small wins naturally expresses itself across all areas. When you see yourself as someone who keeps commitments, you keep commitments everywhere. When you see yourself as someone who prioritizes long-term benefits over short-term pleasures, you make that choice consistently. Remember this. Every extraordinary life you've ever admired was built on a foundation of unremarkable daily actions. Every person you look up to started exactly where you are right now, with the same doubts, the same resistance, and the same tendency to overcomplicate what should be simple. The only difference is they understood something most people never learn. That consistency isn't about perfection. It's about persistence. It's not about doing everything right. It's about never giving up on the process of becoming who you want to be. Your small wins aren't just building habits. They're building you. Start smaller than you think you need to. Be more patient than you want to be. And trust the process even when you can't see the progress. Because every single day, you're either voting for your future self or against them. The choice is yours, but the results are inevitable.